Hey, how you doing? My name is Ryan, and today I'm unveiling my ranking for the best and worst LEGO Star Wars minifigures. Now, this will be the biggest of my ranking videos to date, as LEGO Star Wars has been around since 1999 without missing a single year. So there were over 1,200 minifigures for me to sort through and decide which were good and which were bad. As a reminder, in these videos, I tend to look at only minifigures of named characters, so no big figs, nano figs, micro figs, builds, or cannon fodder figures. However, for Star Wars, I have to bend the rules just a little bit, as there may or may not be a Stormtrooper on this list, because I think the figures were that good. So with that out of the way, let's start off with 1999, the very first year, and I think the best minifigure of that year is Darth Vader. We get a great torso print, a custom helmet, and a really great face underneath that helmet. For being some of the first ever LEGO branded figures, the designers did not hold back at all, delivering an iconic figure right out of the gate. But how about the flip side? How about the worst of 1999? For me, that's Dak Relter. This is not a bad figure in retrospect, just kind of lazy in comparison to the rest. He's the only named character with a plain face. Moreover, he's not the only X-Wing pilot we get in this wave. To use a generic smile face just feels kind of lazy. It feels like a regular X-Wing pilot figure with just a name slapped on it for namesake. But how about 2000, the next year? The best figure of that year, I believe, is Han Solo in his blue legs. A great designed figure with belt printing on the hips, which isn't always the case with figures, a leg holster print on the leg itself, and the smirk is a great reduction / abstraction of the Han Solo character. It's a really holistic design overall that feels like every element is trying to be Han Solo, and that's incredible for this year. But how about the worst? Surprisingly, it's also Han Solo, but in his skiff outfit. This is just a lesser version of the other Han Solo figure. Less print, less detail, less impact. So I just have less to say about that figure. It's the worst of that year. Moving on to 2001, and the best figure is the Stormtrooper. Now, there were only two named characters released in 2001, Alder and Watto, which I'll get to in a little bit. So I had to include henchman figures in this ranking, and I think the Stormtrooper figure is really that good. It's the best of that year. In fact, it's a great figure on its own merits. Great faithful helmet design with a rather complex torso print, especially the gradation on the chest plate. Not to mention an equally detailed print on the custom helmet mold, and you've got yourself a really great figure. And the worst of 2001 is Watto. While I appreciate the effort that went into making this molded head, chest, and back piece, unlike Chewbacca, I think this one is bare, with no printing on those pieces to provide much needed contrast. So Watto kind of feels unfinished, much like a prototype figure, because there's no printing to bring out the details molded into that custom piece. Moving on to 2002, I think the best figure of that year is Sam Wessel. This figure is doing so much more than most Star Wars figures at the time. Continuous printing from the torso to legs, two distinct faces that serve the character, and a rather unique color palette in general, with this sort of taupe purple design. It's a really impressive figure, especially for a character that wasn't given a lot of screen time. But how about the worst of 2002? I think it's Wicket. This has the same issues as Watto, with no printing on the custom molded pieces, and it makes the printing on the original Chewbacca figure all the more special. Next up is 2003, and there's kind of no contest here. The best figure of that year is Boba Fett from Cloud City. This is a pretty easy pick, and it's clear to see why this figure is so expensive nowadays. Helmet printing, arm printing, leg printing, hip printing, it's all cohesive and it's all very clean. This figure is stupidly expensive on Bricklink and eBay, but for historical purposes and quality-wise, I think it might be worth it. Might be worth it. Not that much. But how about the worst of this year? I think it's Luke Skywalker in his black robes. This marks the fourth iteration of this outfit with little to no variation in print or design. But this Luke is technically not a repeat, as this figure is exclusive to 2003. Now, this Luke is not a bad figure compared to some of the other years. It's just kind of obnoxious that repeat figure designs were already a thing this early on. But how about 2004? The best figure of that year, I think, is Greedo. We get a great custom head with printing on it, clean arm printing, and a unique but faithful teal color palette. I think this Greedo figure proves why you need printing on those custom molded pieces to bring out the contrast and the elements sculpted into those designs. But on the flip side, how about the worst? I think it's Leia in her Hoth outfit. This figure has a weird design clash of the rather simplified but realistic outfit, but then an abstract and entirely differently designed face. It's hard to explain, but the face almost doesn't match the body. The same issue arises with the Han Solo figure from this year, and this could have been the result of LEGO moving from yellow heads for branded characters to peach heads. The designs might not have carried over well because the peach heads just look more realistic, so you're expecting a more realistic design. Up next is 2005, and the best figure of this year is C-3PO. This is a vast improvement over the original kind of flesh-colored figure. The new gold finally brings out the detail of the amazing molded head, and the simple but effective torso design is spectacular, especially little bits of gradation around the chest plate. On the flip side, the worst of this year is Mace Windu. Compared to the other figures in this wave like Anakin, the face is painfully simple. The overall figure is also hard to read due to the abundance of dark gray, making the tan legs really stick out. But how about 2006? I think the best figure of this year is one you might not expect. It's Ten Nub, one of the only new figures of that year, and I think it looks really great. A very detailed face for 2006, some nice body print, great color contrast, and it's finally something new. I was a very young builder around this time, and LEGO Star Wars was already feeling quite stale by 2006. I already had like 2 X-Wings, 2 Millennium Falcons, and I keep seeing the same sets over and over again. So a new figure and new set was always a welcome sign. But how about the worst of this year? I think it's Dengar. I'm not sure I get this figure. A strange sci-fi light torso design, just a plain peach face, and a white bandana covering most of the face to begin with. Kind of like an Indiana Jones adventurer. Just kind of a weird figure overall, and since a lot of the figures released that year were repeats, yeah, Dengar is the worst figure of 2006. But how about 2007? What's the best figure of that year? Well, I think it's young Anakin Skywalker. The designers made a really smart choice to make the eyes bigger relative to the rest of the face to emphasize Anakin's innocence. Add to that an effective but simple torso and some oversized hair, and this young Anakin figure is really impactful. As for the worst of that year, I think it's young Obi-Wan. This figure has the same face as Luke Skywalker, which had figures released that same year. With no other context and no discernible details on the print, this could have been just another Luke figure. Up next is 2008, and oddly enough, both the best and worst figure come from the same set, the Rogue Shadow. The best is Battle Damaged Darth Vader, an incredible print variation of Vader, utilizing 2 colored arms and legs to show what's underneath the suit. The face print with bits of helmet still showing is incredible, and the broken helmet headpiece is the cherry on top. And the worst is Juno Eclipse. The face print is the most baffling part of this figure, as it includes both the hair and the face without much color difference between the two. The lack of white in the eyes but blue pupils makes them look unfinished, and the overall unreadability of the face diminishes any quality this figure has. Add to that a boring torso and no other printing, and the face becomes the only distinguishing feature of this figure. And the face is bad. So, this figure is bad. The worst of that year. How about 2009? The best figure, I think, is Newt Gunray. This minifigure has one of the best headpiece to face print transitions I've ever seen, and each individual element is also very well rendered. The torso is clean with a surprisingly intricate design in the center, and the use of orange arms with a hint of orange in the torso makes a convincing illusion of a vest. For such an odd character, we got a really great figure, which is kind of becoming a LEGO Star Wars tradition by this point. And I think the opposite's kind of true with the worst figure. It's Princess Leia. This figure is technically different as her hair is smooth, unlike her other iterations, but if I hadn't told you that, you would have thought this was a repeat, let's be honest. It's strange that LEGO will recycle figures for the very important named characters in Star Wars, but give you whole new ones for the weird one-off crazy alien characters. Ah well. How about 2010? The best figure of that year, I believe, is Cad Bane. This figure is a great sci-fi Western amalgamation. The giant hat and breathing tubes are consistent with the Clone Wars design, and the face is really striking as the bright blue and red stand out wonderfully from the brown and gray body. I am very excited for this year's Cad Bane minifigure, as I think it looks even better than the one in 2010. But the 2010 figure was very good, and I think the best of that year. On the flip side, how about the worst? It's white Boba Fett. This figure feels more like an artificial gimmick than a fully conceived character figure. Now, this isn't like the chrome iterations of characters, where the single tone is used to highlight the elegance and rarity of the figure because it's all chrome and metal. The white print and body just comes off as prototype and unfinished, rather than unique and special. Moving on to 2011, and the best figure of that year is Shak-Ti. While the Clone War aesthetic really misses the mark on some figures, Shak-Ti looks excellent. The design flows from the headpiece to the face very nicely, the dark brown torso contrasts with the bright red and blue face very well, and the headpiece itself is incredible both in construction and print. On the flip side, the worst of this year is young Han Solo. Another figure that feels more like a poorly conceived gimmick rather than a character design. The face looks cartoonish, and the torso is just a repeat of the Return of the Jedi Han print. Young Han Solo feels lazy from a character standpoint in Star Wars itself, and in the minifigure standpoint in LEGO Star Wars. All around bad. Ah well. How about 2012? The best figure of that year, I think, is Darth Malgus. This is like a Darth Vader figure on design steroids. Comic-Con level quality design and print. Custom molded and printed shoulders and chest piece. Balanced torso and leg printing that does not detract from the overall figure. An incredible face print with shading around the yellow eyes conveying evil and malice. Top-notch design, amazing print quality, and the fact that Darth Malgus is a retail figure is just the cherry on top. But how about the worst? I think it's Han Solo. In a year where the figures were getting amazing updates, Han Solo of 2012 just feels stuck in a rut. Minus the white in his eyes and the weird alternate face, this figure feels oddly dated. Extra gray lines on the torso really don't do enough to update this Han Solo figure. And I think the face looks even less like Harrison Ford than the previous figures. Side note, I'll mention each year a different version of this Han Solo skiff figure is released with minimal updates. It won't be the worst of that year for the sake of not making a boring list, but just know, it's an honorary worst of that year. Okay, up next is 2013, and the best of that year, I think, is Luke Skywalker in his X-Wing pilot outfit. This is a great update to this orange jumpsuit, with improved printing on the helmet, torso, hips, legs, and the addition of the orange visor on the face print is a wonderful addition. I also like how the alternate face print on this figure doesn't have the visor, so Luke can kind of flip up and down his orange face shield. But how about the worst of this year? I think it's Han Solo in his Hoth outfit. This has one of the weirdest faces I've ever seen on a LEGO minifigure. I'm not sure if Han is supposed to be cold, angry, or constipated. The alternate face is fine, but unremarkable. The torso and legs are fine, but they read more Boy Scout than Han Solo. A confusing figure overall, and it's kind of weird to see Han Solo take up so many spots of the worst of each year. Kind of strange. But how about 2014? The best is Ben Kenobi. For me, this is the definitive old man Kenobi figure from A New Hope. Well-rendered two-colored beard, clean wrinkles, great flow from the torso to leg printing, and more importantly, it feels like this figure has learned something from every previous Ben Kenobi figure. Putting the first one and this one side by side shows the designers kept the spirit of Obi-Wan, but improved every element, and that's impressive. Less so impressive is the worst of this year, Chancellor Palpatine in his gray robes. I think this figure's face kind of feels like an off-brand or knockoff figure with the amount of wrinkle lines that are on the face. Between that and the cracked pattern on the torso and legs, I'm not sure this figure even looks like Palpatine. Aren't his gray robes supposed to be a little bit darker? Honestly, I'm not sure because I'm not that much of a Star Wars fanatic. Compare the size of my Star Wars board to my Marvel minifigure board, and you'll see just how big of a Star Wars fan I am. Pretty casual if you ask me. Anyway, how about 2015? The best figure of that year, I think, is Poe Dameron. Another amazing update to the X-Wing pilot outfit. The The darker orange looks incredible, the detailed and complex vest print, the new helmet mold and print, not to mention the addition of the visor as part of the helmet. The face also bears a strong resemblance to actor Oscar Isaac, which isn't always the case with minifigures, so nice job with this one, LEGO, but not so nice job on the worst of this year, which is Tasu Leech. Even though he's not a main character, he is named and therefore up for the worst. And despite a lot of this figure being exclusive, it's just not very good or inspiring. A boring torso, legs, dark brown printing, and the black is hard to read. The face is fine, but the figure is hardly recognizable. I guess I was just expecting better from LEGO Star Wars if they wanted to include a named character in this set. But also, honorable mention to this Han Solo skiff figure. Okay, 2016, the best of that year is Ahsoka Tano. There is a lot to love here. The face, the headpiece, the torso print, the leg print, the silhouette, and more importantly, it helped inspire an amazing knockoff minifigure, so it's got that going for it. But how about the worst of 2016? I think it's Bodhi Rook. My main problems with this figure are the oddly Jurassic Park looking torso and the oddly cartoony face with goggles. And there's not enough in this figure to offset the bad design choices, leaving us with a pretty bad Bodhi Rook figure. But also, honorable mention to this Han Solo skiff figure, now with dark brown legs. Up next is 2017, and the best figure of that year is Rey in her gray robes from The Last Jedi. There is a great flow from torso to legs, even with non-parallel lines in this figure, a custom hairpiece, and a really close face print to actress Daisy Ridley. This figure is a marked improvement from the previous Rey figures, and that's the goal. But how about the worst? I think it's Poe Dameron. All we get in this figure is a new jacket piece, and it's not that good to begin with. So yeah, bad figure. But also, honorable mention to this Han Solo skiff figure, now with the new hairpiece that was already being used for the past couple of years. Moving on to 2018, and we get a wonderful redemption arc, with the best figure of this year as its Mace Windu. This minifigure is a vast improvement from the original. Not only does the face actually resemble the actor and character, but the print is impeccable, the design is elegant, and the small details on the belt are wonderful. This is just an impressive figure overall, and very easily the best of 2018. On the flip side, how about the worst? I think it's this figure. This is a figure whose existence is a sign of LEGO Star Wars running out of ideas for new characters, having to pull from really obscure characters that only make seconds of screen time. In fact, quick game, comment below if you know what this character's name is. Go ahead, I'll wait. This character's name is Wooher, the bartender at Mos Eisley Cantina. I did not know his name, and the only redeeming qualities of this figure are his chest hair and gray sideburns. Everything else on this figure feels lazy, and the whole thing feels like a very calculated move on LEGO's part to add an exclusive figure to a set that we've seen since the early days of LEGO Star Wars just to raise the price. Anyway, rant over. How about 2019? The best figure of that year, I think, is Princess Leia. Some things are worth the wait. And this Leia figure finally gets all of the pieces right. The great hair, the great face, the great torso print, and the final addition, the sloped legs with printing on both the front and the back. This figure to me is the quintessential Princess Leia figure. It gets everything right, it's iconic, it's beautiful, and it's the best of this year. But on the flip side, how about the worst? I think it's General Pride. Given how many evil, gray-haired old men figures exist in LEGO Star Wars, this figure does nothing to separate itself from every other Tarkin figure, to the point where, without being told, you might not have known this is General Pride. Again, pretty bad character to begin with, but it led to an even worse figure. How about 2020, where I have to bend the rules a little bit again, because the best figure of this year, deservedly so, is the 501st Legion Clone Jet Trooper. This figure is so good, it's hard to think of it as just a fodder figure. The incredible pattern work on the helmet, the blue accents on the torso and legs, even just the added blue arms add so much texture and contrast to this figure. Every element is so impeccable, making it even better than all the other named characters of 2020. It's that good of a figure. No wonder so many Star Wars fans were waiting with bated breath to get this figure and bought hundreds of those sets. This figure is that good. But you know what figure is that bad? V Morardi. Before I dive into the figure specifics, I just need to explain. This is a minifigure based on a comic book character made popular by a theme park ride. V-Maradi comes from Disney's Galaxy's Edge, and not only is the concept weird, but so is the figure. The main feature is the blue highlighted hair. Everything else just feels like generic rebel soldier, especially when compared to the Jet Trooper, where every element was so meticulously designed. And with that, we've reached the last year of this ranking video, 2021. I think the best figure of this year is Din Djarin from The Mandalorian. Despite being the second Mando figure released, I think this was the far superior print. Better color contrast, great texturing on the silver armor plates, clean helmet mold print, solid arm printing, and a nice jetpack to top it off. It's great to see LEGO Star Wars take the already kind of stale Mandalorian character from Jango Fett and Boba Fett and make it new and special again. That's what's great about LEGO, and that's what can be so powerful with making new characters in Star Wars. But how about the worst figure? It's General Maximilian Veers. Does a little hat print and exclusive face save this figure from being the worst? No, not really. Not only is this LEGO just adding the bare minimum to make this generic Imperial figure a named character just again to raise the price of the set that it's in, but the upgrade is so minimal and bland to justify any minifigure inflation. The face is so just generic confusion and mad, and the small white emblem on the hat should be standard by this point. So that is my ranking for the best and worst LEGO Star Wars minifigures from each year. I would love to know what you guys think of my ranking in the comment section down below. And as always, if you like this video, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching.